Good evening and welcome to the Caucus meeting of the Florence City Council. The first item is discussion of our 2025 tax rates on real and personal property. Just a reminder that we will have our tax rate hearing tomorrow. And if you do wish to submit comments to our city clerk, you are welcome to do that by email, or you can call and make arrangements if you cannot make the public hearing tomorrow. So we do want to hear citizen input if possible, but I want to turn this over at this point to Jason Lewis, our Finance Director, for his presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, so I'm going to go through about 10 slides here, discussing, go to the next slide. We'll recap the Mayor's priorities from fiscal year 25-26 budget, go through some background, talk about some parts of property tax that, frankly, I didn't know before I started this job, get everyone kind of up to speed on where assessments came in for tax year 25, and then we'll go discuss a bit the maximum allowable rates, which some of y'all may understand quite well, others maybe not quite as well. I fall into that second bracket myself, so I've done a lot of learning over the past 3 or 4 months about property taxes, so I'll share what I can today. And then we'll talk about a tax proposal, a 3% decrease that hopefully you all saw in the memo that I sent out this week with the packet. So we'll kind of talk about where a 3% decrease would put us from a revenue projection perspective. And then we'll talk about other scenarios that go a bit further than 3%. So just a quick recap of the Mayor's priorities. You all can read them up on the screen. I think property taxes kind of fall into the lowered cost of living bucket. One thing I did when I was in the Army is when I started every presentation, I would start with the commander's objectives and try to nest whatever I was doing into one of the objectives. So I think potentially lowering property taxes probably falls into that fourth item there. So to give a quick background, real property assessments grew at around 3% for 2025. New growth totaled around $50,000 per $1,000 of assessed value. Importantly, tangible property assessments decreased almost 20% versus tax year 24. And you'll see that in some of the tables I have in following slides that tangible property assessments bounce around quite a bit. For example, this year versus last year, the warehouse assessments decreased 30%, which is pretty significant, I would say. I'm not an economist. I don't want to speculate too much about what that says about the economy at large, but that did have a significant impact on our maximum rate for tangible property. And then shifting gears a little bit, KRS 78530C3 allows the city to levy a special tax to fund our hazardous employees' retirement service costs, and that special assessment may not generate more revenue than is necessary to pay for those service costs. And you'll see on the next slide here what that maximum assessment would be for hazardous employees. So that's $1.47. Again, that's the maximum. And in the past, we haven't come close to that, to assessing that rate. So maximum rates for 2025, based on the assessments that came in from Boone County this summer. So $1.87 would be the maximum for real estate, so that's a 4% increase, and then $2.39, also a 4% for tangible personal property. Again, these are the maximum rates that we can assess. Now, to get to the 3% tax rate decrease proposal. And again, this is just a proposal, which, if you looked at my memo, it aligns with a lot of the objectives that, we're looking to achieve in terms of revenue for this fiscal year 25-26. So in order to get to that 3% decrease, we would assess a special assessment of 44 cents per 1,000 to get the real property total to $2.31. That includes the maximum $1.87 for real property, and this would be a 3% decrease versus last year, $2.38, which was also a 3% decrease versus the year prior. In terms of tangible, you can see that we keep the special assessment the same. So that doesn't change between real and tangible. So you see the $2.39. Again, this is the proposal here. And that would get us to a total of $2.83 for tangible property. Now that goes up because there was a significant decrease in tangible property assessments versus last year. So there's sort of a inverse relationship there. Assessments went down, our maximum tangible property tax can go up. So that's why we see that 241 to 283. And if you look a little bit lower on the table, you can see that over the past 5 years since the pandemic started, tangible property taxes have bounced around quite a bit, going from $3.38 all the way down to $2.65. So I would say that based on my knowledge of tangible assessments, this is a bit of a moving target, but the real property assessments are much more stable. So,
just for the benefit of people, explain what's included in the tangible assessment. Sometimes there's a mistaken thought process that it's personal property, that it includes things like cars, and it doesn't. So if you could just define for them what that tangible assessment includes.
Sure. Give me 1 sec to look at all of the different aspects of tangible. Okay, so I received the tangible property tax valuation tax roll from Boone County. It is 6 items. So the main one is item number 35, which I'm looking at, which is goods stored in public warehouse. That makes up around 50% of the total tangible assessment, and that total went down 30% versus last year. So a significant drop. There's also merchants inventory, which goes into our calculation. Manufacturers finished goods, so these are not works in progress. These are finished items coming off the line. Schedule C, so charter aircraft, registered watercraft, non-Kentucky, quite the list here of items. And then another one is construction work in progress. So these are items these are places that are being built essentially. So again, there's 6 different listed items that go into Florence's overall assessment for tangible property.
Ms. Whalen, were you trying to make the distinction that the tangible property is more for businesses, not a residential or a residence fee?
A lot of it is that, and I think the other important piece of that is that it's self-reporting. So
Correct.
the warehouses, the companies self-report what they have in stock, cars on the lot, that type of thing as their inventory, and that's another reason why it bounces so much every year. They try to lessen the inventory that they have on hand. I don't know that it's a direct statement to the economy at all, but rather the fact that they're directly reporting it to us, and there's really no oversight on what they report as being what they've got in stock or in inventory.
Yeah, and there are significant revisions made as well. I'm not sure that those revisions flow all the way down to our level, but I know at higher levels, there are significant revisions that come in every month. So agree that this is a bit of a moving target. Let's see. So our budget projection for property taxes for fiscal year 25-26 coming out of our adopted budget was $10.1 million. That's a 1% increase versus last year's total budget projection for property taxes. Inflation for the past 12 months has been about 3%, 2.7, but kind of rounding up to 3. I looked at property tax revenues since 2017, and the year-over-year compound annual growth rate was 3%. So 3 is sort of the magic number here. That's kind of what we've seen on average. Again, revenue's a bit higher during the pandemic, a bit lower beforehand, sort of stabilizing here, I would say, finally coming out of the COVID era. And then, yeah, that $10.1 million number is where essentially we would land for a revenue collection projection if we were to institute a 3% reduction in property taxes and real estate taxes for tax year 25. What that means for our residents is that on average, real estate tax bills would decrease around $25 per bill. And again, that's a rough average, but I'll have a bit more on those numbers with some scenarios here. So if we look at, say we changed nothing, right? Say, we kept our total real tax rate at 238. You would see obviously that there would be no change in your tax bill for this tax year. You already talked about the 3% rate change, and then looking at 5, 8, and 10. From a revenue projection perspective, every percentage change amounts to around $100,000 decrease in revenue collection for us as a city. For the resident who's paying the bill, that amounts to about a $10 to $15 decrease for every percentage tax rate decrease. So, that can add up. If we go down to around a 10% decrease, you're looking at around $90 decrease in your average tax bill for the citizen of Florence. So just wanted to lay out some scenarios here. I think the key takeaway for us and for everyone is that, based on what we sort of thought when going into the budget workshop back in April or whenever it was, that, assessments have grown around 3% on average for the past 10 years. Thinking that, okay, we assume that again, and the assessments proved correct from the county that grew around 3%. So, what does that look like to get us to, a slow but manageable growth of around 1% revenue collection, and this 3% proposal would do that for us. So, just from a purely logical, does this keep us on track in terms of revenue collection so that we can continue to fund everything we've talked about and adopted in the budget for this fiscal year? That 3% would do that. So I think that was, that's really it. The tangible assessment is something that is hard to predict. So it's kind of a difficult task to try to predict what those come in at. But, for us thinking about, or, in my role thinking about how do we stay on track from a revenue collection perspective, I think that 3% is kind of where we landed, so.
Is there any questions? All right. Thank you, Jason. Again, just to reiterate, the City of Florence will hold a public hearing tomorrow, Wednesday, September 3rd at 4:30 PM in the council chambers at the Florence Government Center. The purpose of this hearing is to receive public comments regarding the proposed 2025 tax rates on real and personal property. And it is important to note that what you see published in the ad is the maximum rates allowed by Kentucky law. City Council can and often does set rates below these maximums. Again, to recap, the state law does require us to advertise the maximum rate of real property at 1.87 per 1,000 of assessed value, tangible property at 2.39%, or $2.39 per 1,000 of assessed value, and the special assessment for hazardous duty retirement maximum is $1.47 per 1,000 of assessed value. These are not necessarily the rates that will be adopted. City Council will review the financial projections, historical averages, and community impact before setting the actual rates, which may be lower. Included in their packets this week was scenarios and the outlining of a 3% reduction in the real and personal property tax rates. Council will consider that and discuss that at their next meeting. Neighborhood Night Out is Tuesday, September 9th from 5 to 7 at Lincoln Woods Park. Enjoy food, music by DJ Teddy G, and connect with city officials and staff. For more information, you can contact Administration Department at 859-647-8177. The city's Arbor Day will be held on Saturday, September 20th, beginning at 10 a.m. at the Florence Government Center. For details, please contact the Public Services Department at 859-647-5416. The Florence Police Department will hold their Teen Academy beginning October 22nd through November 19th. The 5-week class will be held on Wednesdays from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. The application is available on the City of Florence website. Please contact the Florence Police Department at 859-647-5420 for more information. Is there anyone on council who desires recognition? Ms. Whalen?
Just a question and compliment. We received this book in our packets. It's a visitor's guide. It's beautiful. It's very well done. My question, I guess, is how is it being distributed and who's the target audience for this brochure?
Melissa, do you want to answer that?
So Meet NKY has already picked up a couple of boxes. We'll be also delivering those to the visitor centers. Some of the restaurants featured in there have also requested copies to send out. We are also going to possibly send it out to residents if they'd like a copy of it. It's on our website now for distribution. So pretty much anybody, and then of course with the Florence Y'all's All-Star Game coming next year, that'll also be helpful for people visiting the area.
How often will we redo this?
I think every 3 years.
Okay.
Not next year.
It's a huge undertaking and it's very well done, but I was just curious as to where it was going to be. You know, obviously, we're not mailing this to all the residents because they're not the target audience, but it is available on the website and you can request one if that's what you want.
And I believe it was not the current fiscal year budget, but it was approved in the prior fiscal year budget.
Yes, it was. And so, yep.
One of them, they're rollover things, huh?
We actually
I think we
finished it.
spent it all.
We spent it, we finished it before.
Finished it
so-
before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Ms. Chambers?
So to the police chief, I recently was told about a different policy that the county has versus the city regarding people being locked out of their cars and how the things that you are and are not able to help with. And I was just wondering if you could go over the policy that the city of Florence has.
As far as lockouts, we don't have the equipment or are trained to do lockouts. The county used to, but most of their lockouts were people that were shopping in Florence. And it just brought them into the city and took out from their services in the county. So if there is an emergency, if a kid is locked in a car or a dog is in a car in distress, the Florence supervisor can request somebody from the county to come unlock, and they'll do it if there's an emergency. But other than that, somebody would have to call a tow company or a locksmith.
Anyone else on council?
Another part of that is today's vehicles, the technology that's in the doors, the switches and wires and all of that. The fire service has quit opening doors as well because of the liability of it. In the event of emergency, we'll just take the window out.
Yeah. Cut to the chase. Any department heads? Anyone in the audience? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Whalen? Second by Mr. Nguyen. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.